Good afternoon, and welcome to a special edition of Real Talks. I'm David Steele, and I want to welcome back Kyle for this. I got to, off the top, I want to apologize to everybody because it's been a minute since I've done something, and I had a little, topsy-turvy things happen. Life happens. And so, basically, I've been trying to get my life together for the last 2 months. So that's why I haven't been putting out any content. For everybody on Twitter and those people and those people that have been watching the videos, I want to say thank you. I do have a plan to get back to this on a regular basis because this is what I want to do. And, I love doing this, and I know Kyle does as well. So we'll talk about that another time. We're here for one of the top 3 most anticipated films of this year that just came out yesterday, and that is the biggest film, I would say, next to Avatar, and that is Wakanda Forever. So let me welcome Kyle in. Kyle, how have you been?
Hello, everybody. I've been really good. It has been a bit of a slow couple months lately with movies and not that many big releases, so it was really good to see a big movie like Wakanda Forever be released in theaters last night.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I had bought, in my Regal right down the street from me, I found out that they were actually doing a double feature.
Yeah.
And so I tweeted this out. And by the way, I am on Twitter, as a mess it is. Kyle and I are on Twitter. I'm at Wannabe Rounder. That's WANNABEROUNDER. And Kyle, where can they find you?
I'm at Arking Kyle. That's capital ARKING, capital KYLE.
Perfect. Now that we have that out of the way, so tell everybody what time and when you saw the show.
Actually, I want to ask you first, David. You said you saw a double feature. How did that go? Did the movie play after the credits?
Okay. So I saw actually it was 12 noon. I saw the 2018 unbelievable movie Black Panther. I'd seen it 3 times on the big screen, and I'd seen it on Disney Plus for, as a matter of fact, that was the last podcast we did. And so for Flashback Fridays, which I actually want to get back to, and we'll talk about it another time. But yeah, so that was the last one I did. But so I actually saw Black Panther first, and then there was, the credits rolled, and so there was about a half an hour intermission, and then they started Wakanda Forever. And so they really only did one trailer in front of Wakanda Forever, and I don't know if it was the same one for you. I imagine it was, and that was the other anticipated movie we will be doing a Spoilercast for, and that is Avatar: The Way of Water. Did you see that trailer as well?
Yeah, I sure did. It was right before my movie started, so...
Yeah. So... But
yeah, my theater, I saw it at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time yesterday. It was the first screen they had in standard because Regal has now implemented the new feature called Screen X, and I'm not exactly a big fan of it. It's all 3 sides of the room on the screen, and on the 2 walls adjacent to them have the movie projected on them, and it's a bit distracting. It's almost, I believe what it is, it's the IMAX presentation of the movie, but like the left and right side is what you would see in IMAX, and the screen itself is just what you would see in standard. And I don't care for it too much. I've seen a couple of movies with that format, but I decided to see it, of course, in standard first, and it was, I want to get to you because I think that I'm curious on how this stands, but apparently there's a thing going on where the screens, like the brightness of the theater and the way that the movie's presented is, I'm seeing kind of an issue in many theaters. And personally for me, I think that there were some scenes in this film that were very hard to make out what was happening, and also what like the reactions on the faces of the characters were. I don't know. Did you have that issue?
Yeah. So, two things. Number one, I actually saw Elvis in Screen X. So, a couple. Yeah. So, talk about it. I had never heard of Screen X before.
Yeah.
So I went into this and I went, oh, this is a new experience. So when I saw it projected, I went, oh, this is kind of cool. I mean, it's not IMAX per se, and but it wasn't just your standard screen. So I enjoyed it. Not really knowing much about, I mean, everybody knows Elvis, but not knowing really the story and everything else, I liked it. I would probably go see another film in Screen X. As a matter of fact, they're actually doing Screen X down the street here at this Regal as well. To your second point about some of the scenes being dark. And so Kyle and I, and sometimes Christina, host Twitter Spaces. And we were on a Twitter Space last night with several established people, and we were talking about this. And it wasn't just Kyle's theater either. Now, I don't know if it was just poorly lit or it was just too dark. But, somebody said it last night, and it's really relevant. It kind of reminded me of the first time you saw Tenet with the audio. And because from what I understand, I haven't seen the film, but from what I understand, a lot of people were having a hard time with the audio watching Tenet the first time. And so when they went back, it was unbearable in theaters because they didn't have subtitles. So when it came out on, they had to put the closed captioning on to figure out what was saying. To your point, this is one of those things where lighting is absolutely imperative. I think, and this is just because we've seen, fires lit as used, I mean, you just take a look at Game of Thrones. They have hundreds and hundreds of candles. Yeah. If they had one more fire, I think, even if it was a small one, and I think that was the other issue too, and we'll get to this in a minute, is that it was too far back. So that was another, when you have these characters right up in front of you and you have the light all the way back here, that was another problem. So as we start the film.
But do you know what's interesting about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I saw on YouTube, they released the exact scene that I had the most trouble seeing in the theater. And let me tell you this, it looked completely different. On YouTube, the scene they released is way clearer. I can make out the reactions on their faces, and it's really interesting. I'm going to see it again tonight at a different theater. I'm very curious to see how that is presented. I had a similar issue with Eternals. When Eternals came out back in November of last year, I also thought there were some scenes, especially the beginning of the film, that were covered in darkness that were very hard to make out. And then when I watched it on Disney Plus, it kind of had a similar look to it. So I don't know what it is, but I was watching the John Campea show today, and Robert Meyer Burnett, who's one of the speakers on that show, was saying he also had issues, but he believes that it's the people that distributed the film to the theaters. They didn't have like QC people on there, picking apart to make sure every scene looked good enough and presentable in theater.
Right, I understand.
So hopefully,
I'll be interested to find out. A, was Ryan involved with the editing? I imagine he was. And B, wouldn't that be the editor's job?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
Could it have to do with, like lately they've had a lot of scrunching time. I believe Wakanda Forever, it's not widely known, but this is a movie that just made its, finished date. It was a movie that may have been postponed, but somehow they persevered and they made sure this movie was released on time.
Yeah.
And that may have also been a factor with how they could have rushed it into theaters. But it's be interesting to see how it looks in other formats.
You're going to notice this. Yeah. You're going to notice more the second time through. So let's get to the film right off. So Marvel being Marvel, when they lose somebody, unfortunately, whether it's Stan Lee or Chadwick Boseman or whatever, they always have that great tribute. And so, with Stan Lee, when they lost him, they actually had the credits roll, but it was completely silent. And for this, what else can you say? I mean, from what I've heard, I wasn't one of them, but there were a lot of tears shed when that Marvel Studios thing was going, because it was a tribute straight up to Chadwick, and it was an amazing, amazing job. So we jump right into the movie. I mean, just straight off, and we see Shuri rushing around, trying to figure out what's going on, and so because Chadwick, so the Black Panther is ill, and so she's trying to save her brother's life, and so she has her tech, and she's trying to figure out the confidence rate of the herb, and it was only in the 20%, and so right when she's about ready to try something else, we see the Queen come in, Angela Bassett, who, by the way, we'll get to her in a minute. She was amazing. And the look on her face, and one of those things where she doesn't have to say a word, but and he's like, the king's gone. And of course, this, just kills Shuri, and she's just devastated. And so the very next thing you see is the funeral, which I thought was beautifully and masterfully done. Unbelievable. What were your thoughts?
Honestly, I don't think I've ever been that moved watching a film begin. The beginning of Wakanda Forever hit me unlike any movie I have ever watched in my life. And one of the reasons being is we have been wondering for 2 years how Marvel, Coogler, the whole team would approach this film. And I think that there was this almost, not doubt, but there was a feeling that, maybe they might not be able to do it. They might not be able to get it done. And then there was also this feeling of, it's not here yet. And I've watched many interviews with Ryan Coogler, and he mentioned in one of the interviews that when the film ended, he felt like he finally was at this point where he realized to himself he's never going to work with his friend again, with Chadwick. And I don't know if you knew this, David, but when they made Wakanda Forever, the number one person on the call sheet was Chadwick Boseman. And it was the thing about this movie that makes it unlike any film I think ever made. There might be one or two, but to my memory, it's a movie where Chadwick, his spirit, like his being, still was with them as they were filming this movie. And in that opening scene, I, as a viewer, almost felt like we were finally saying goodbye to him. And it really hit me, because I thought to myself, just look at how magical the power of movies are, that we can have someone, an actor, play a role that can mean so much to people around the world. And he became Black Panther. There are children around that think he is actually Black Panther. I remember going to a birthday party once and thinking that literally Spider-Man was at my birthday party. Like the real Spider-Man, even though there is no real Spider-Man. That's a fictional character. But a great actor makes a fictional character feel real. And that is what Chadwick did. And seeing this movie, seeing that opening scene and him actually dying and seeing because, okay, one of my favorite scenes in the film is the funeral, but most specifically, it's when the coffin is raised up into the Wakandan aircraft. And they play the Ancestral Plains score that Ludwig Göransson composed for the first Black Panther movie. And this score is also like a part of like Black Panther's main theme in a sense. And the way they played it, that is when it really hit me, because it was like, this is us as an audience saying goodbye to T'Challa. And I was like a mess after that. I almost felt like if this was on television, I would have probably maybe paused the movie, because I was so emotionally wrecked by this sequence that like I couldn't even pay attention for the next like 5 minutes in the scene after that, because it was just so moving. And of course you have the opening logo, which just is equally as touching. And there's no music played in that opening logo too. Every Marvel film has had sound in the opening logo. Infinity War is one of the only ones, and No Way Home, they don't play music, they play an audio track. Like, for instance, in No Way Home, they play Jake Gyllenhaal's Mysterio saying that Peter Parker's Spider-Man, and
right. Yeah. No, absolutely.
Like, it's very different, but like here it was just silence. And we'll get to it at the end, but once again, also the end of the movie is silence. And it just, like that really struck me to my core. I love that sequence so much.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few times in film where you can really capture the essence of not only a person, but a character. And to your point earlier, this was one of the biggest mysteries, right, for the last 2 years. How are they going to pay tribute to him, essentially? And what are they going to do? And how long is it going to be? And so I agree with you wholeheartedly about the funeral scene. The way they raised it up, and it was just, even the coffin, Kyle. Oh. My God. And it was just
I'm getting teary-eyed just thinking about it, dude.
It was just unbelievable in how they did it. And so, it was really good. That whole sequence and how they did it. So, okay, we moved past 1 year later. So we have, everybody's in Wakanda, and so now we go to, and correct me if I'm missing any scenes here. So now we're going to a something out in the ocean.
Yeah.
And so they think that, because, that was the whole premise, that vibranium was only in Wakanda. Well, we go to this oil rig out in the Atlantic Ocean, and they think, guess what? We have vibranium. And so somebody lands on a helicopter. She comes out. She's, an important person. Lake Bell is her name, from what I understand. And so,
fabulous actress.
So, yeah.
Underrated character actor.
Yeah. So she's in doing the controls as they go down. So they have two divers go down, and there's this large contraption, for lack of a better word, and there was a drill bit that basically broke, or was near broken, and they found this vibranium. So one of the divers goes a little bit further, and next thing you know, they lose contact with him. Okay. And she says, well, can you see him? And then turns around, and he's completely detached, and next thing you know, she's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And so, signal lost on both of them. Now, this is when one of the strange things happens. All of the crew members start to jump overboard. Like, what the hell is going on? So then we see a little pier of a couple heads out of the ocean. And this is when we first meet the underwater people. And so they basically start to attack the oil rig because they felt like they were being under attack. And so, yeah, Lake Bell doesn't survive long. She gets a spear put right through her. And so then they get the chopper that was going to be, they try to escape, was swung around and just thrown in the Atlantic. And so now nobody knows what's going on. So the next scene we have is United Nations. And this is where Angela Bassett just shines. And so we see, and I don't know if you noticed this, and I'm sure it was deliberate, but when they were doing quick shots of all of the different countries, how they misspelled the United States.
Did they?
Did you notice it? Yes, deliberately. Check it out tonight when you're watching it.
Okay.
You had France, but you had, his name escapes me off the top of my head, but he was on The West Wing. He's a fantastic actor. I don't have my phone near me. Yes. So he played the ambassador.
It's funny. I was like, I love the MCU, obsessed with the MCU, watched every film multiple times. I was almost thinking, wait, was he in a movie before? Like, he fit so well. He fits so well into that scene.
He did.
I could so buy him being in one of the other films, but clearly he wasn't. But I was.
And so that was the first thing that caught my eye. Was okay, they're actually doing this, and so the United Nations, basically, one of the I believe it was a spokeswoman, and she says, or they said, so it's come to our attention that we have, you're not sharing the resources that you were supposed to be doing. You said you would.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just goes to Angela Bassett. And I put out a tweet the other day, or yesterday. I said, with part of the reaction, I said, it's nice to see strong women kicking ass, not only with their words, but physically. And we'll get to her in a minute. And basically, the next thing you see is, she said, look, Richard Schiff, that's his name. Thank you. I knew it. I just couldn't think of it. Anyways, so she basically said, look, you encouraged on us. And I love the sequence when they're all attacking. The military comes in. And so, but what I'm getting at is when the door opens and you see
Okoye.
Okoye standing there with her spear and about ready to kick some ass.
It's a trailer shot too, which is I did not expect, like, when you watch a trailer and you're like, okay, I know when that's going to happen. I did not expect that shot to be in that scene. I was like, oh, so that's what that shot is from. It was so well.
Yeah. So we keep going to the United Nations, and the Queen basically says, look, you're encouraging on us. And so then she marches in all of the people, because you'd think they'd kill him, right? Just to, she marches in all of the people, the prisoners, and she has them get on their knees. And she's like, look, the next time you try something like this punishment isn't going to be as light. Just get that across. So she was really strict about it, which, I mean, obviously, But, so we go from the United Nations, and then what happens after that?
Well,
so
can I touch upon the...
Go for it, yeah.
So, the United Nations scene is funny to me because that was the scene that I kind of checked out of because I was still emotionally reeling from the... from the first,
you'll like it then.
And I got to rewatch it, especially because I think they had subtitles and stuff. So I was like, I wasn't even paying attention. I will say
they did, yes. Which we'll get to in a couple minutes.
To add on to the beginning, I forgot to mention. I love that the movie starts with T'Challa still alive. It doesn't begin where he's dead. I like seeing. It felt to me that Chadwick was still there. Even though, you know, he wasn't on screen, I loved, like, I don't know how this works for others, but it felt almost comforting to me that T'Challa was still alive when I was watching this film. And I even, like, felt like Shuri, like, oh, maybe they can save them. We know that they wouldn't, but, like, I was still with Shuri, like, you can do it. But anyway, going back to the Talocan, the entrance of the Talocan people, they are the ones that attack the, I want to call it like an oil rig, but, you know, the ship.
That's the right thing. They didn't oil rig.
And boy, I think that they had such a great entrance into this film. One of my favorite parts was the sound design, because they play this music like almost as if like a mermaid is calling a sailor to the rocks, and it just causes all of these people on the ship to start jumping and going into the water, and then you still aren't seeing, you know, the Talocan, these people jumping, and I just love that building of dread and the unknown. This movie was scarier than I thought it would be. The trailers don't really give you a sense of that, but it really is. And then, oh man, the entrance, the first like moment where you see Namor, and a lot of audience members probably don't know at the time that it is him, but he takes down this helicopter, and it was like, oh, the helicopter's being pulled back. And I say to myself, do they have magnets or something? And I was like, oh, snap, Namor can fly. That's why. And then you just see this epic shot of Namor, you know, in the sky, floating in just darkness. And then it cuts to this beautiful sunset in Wakanda. And you know that there's dread. And it's interesting because it's a bit similar to how they introduced Killmonger in the first Black Panther movie, because you're introduced to him at this like art gallery / museum.
Right, exactly. And then all of a sudden the violence kicks in.
All of a sudden the violence
and
kicks in. And that's how you
and that's it. It's a beautiful disaster. Does that make sense? It's a beautiful disaster. And so it's one of those things where it just, you know, you go from really dark to really light. The contrast there is what gets you.
And don't you love the design? I love the design of the Talocan people. People can say, they're ripping off Avatar and everything. But I
gotta be honest with you. The first time I saw one of those, I went, oh my, you know, of course, you see the trailer for The Way of Water. I went, oh my God. I mean, it's just like watching it. Go ahead.
I love seeing how they, in water, they are normal skin color. But when they go out of water, not only do they need to breathe, you know, with a like a respirator, but they also have their skin changes color blue. Namor doesn't have that. He is the same in both underwater and out of water. But I thought that was such a really cool thing. And we'll get to it later, but I thought the character of Atuma, he's like Namor's right-hand man, this big guy. Kind of looks like if like Jason Momoa played one of the characters in this movie, but he's this huge guy that has a hammerhead shark like on his helmet, and it's just, oh, this guy is such a, I love this character. He was so badass, so cool, and he got stuff done. That was a great opening sequence for those characters and their introduction into the MCU. I think what's interesting, because like the next scene when you have the sunset on Wakanda and you see the entrance to Wakanda, if you remember the first Black Panther movie, their entrance into Wakanda is, I will say, one of the greatest scenes in cinematic history. It is by far up there, you know, with some of the greatest moments, because this is a time where you're seeing Afrofuturism and you're seeing something that you have never seen on screen before. And what is so beautiful about that sequence is also the music that is played. And this movie it shocked me because the score that is played in this film is done by Ludwig Göransson, the same composer of the first film, but it is different. He doesn't reuse a lot of the themes a lot of the time in the movie. Like, a lot of the themes that he plays are variations of the themes that he came up with in the first film. And that surprised me, because usually when you see films, like, say, if you see a John Williams scored movie, a Hans Zimmer scored film, you will usually hear the same theme again. But Ludwig decided to, like, make almost like variations. And I think one of those reasons is that I think he wanted us to feel a sense of loss of the feelings we had from the first film, because Wakanda is completely different now that they no longer have their protector. And not only just the music, but the tone of the movie is so much more dramatic, but also more solemn and, like, really sad compared to the first film, where you're watching it and you're like, yeah, we're in Wakanda, yeah. Here it's like, oh, Wakanda, oh no.
You feel heartbreak.
Exactly.
I think the word you're looking for is heartbreak.
Yeah.
Because you know. And so it's tough. So
it's made in a factory. Like, if they made this movie, a lesser director or a lesser even studio, I feel, would have just made this movie look exactly the same as the first film.
And you couldn't.
It could
That's
not.
the thing. You couldn't do it.
So important. It makes it so much more meaningful.
Yeah. So we get back to Wakanda. It's a year later. And so, yeah, at that point, so they're trying to now, at this point, in comes our good friend Martin Freeman.
Mm.
And so he's trying to figure out who did this. You know, is this the Wakandans, and why would they be doing this to protect the vibranium if there is them? And so yeah, no. So at that point,
you know,
but we also,
I think I've been thinking lately. I'm gonna see it again tonight, but
yeah,
I think one of my criticisms might be Martin Freeman's storyline in this film. I think that the inclusion, as we get to, like, they want to explore the geopolitical effects and reaction of this movie, or of the death of the king and what's going on. But there are moments, and we'll probably get to them, but it's moments where it almost feels like it was unnecessary. And also it made the film longer that way, to have a character.
Well, I think here's the thing. I think it was trying. So I have two thoughts. Number one, the best geopolitical, if you're going to call it geopolitical thriller we have in the MCU, is Winter Soldier, hands down. Just because you have such a great actor in Robert Redford playing Alexander Pierce, and then you have the juxtaposition of power, so to speak, against privacy, which, you know, is a real world thing today. And number two, you can even go so far as to say Civil War. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, remember, you know, he lost his father at the United Nations. And so now he's trying to juggle, and this is where we really meet T'Challa for the first time, where he was actually, because that whole scene with his father, you know, two people can get more done talking than, you know, and then his father walks in, and his father was all about that. And so when he lost his father, that's when he took a different path. This was trying to do that, but it didn't necessarily accomplish it. I think you could have, and this is just me, the way you can tell if a character is needed or not is if you can remove him from the storyline, and the story can still go. So to your point, I think they could have removed the whole Martin Freeman character and not have him been in it, or a very small portion of it, and still had it go. So once that was done, so he was trying to figure out what was going on, and they were trying to figure out how this drill was made. And of course, this was going to a college student in Cambridge. And by the way, this is one of my criticisms of Phase 4 is before Phase 4, you could walk into a Marvel movie not having any prior knowledge or very little knowledge and watch a movie and enjoy it. Today, it's very hard, okay, whether it's Loki, whether it's Falcon Winter Soldier, whether it's whatever it is, Ironheart. I had no clue she was in Ironheart, the student. No clue. So as somebody who didn't know this, it was fresh. And I thought she was great. So we see this student, and so sure. So before this, though, Okoye basically says to the queen, look, we got to go on a mission. Let me bring Shuri because, to get her out. And about maybe this will help her grieve and everything else. So we go to Cambridge, and so they find the student, and at which point they say, look, Shuri's like, look, let me have 5 minutes with her, and I will talk to her, and I will get her to come with me. And so subsequently, she's like, okay, fine, you got 5 minutes. So she goes into the dorm, and she's like, look, and of course she's blown away by it. She's like, oh my God, you're Princess Shuri, what are you doing here? And so at which point, she basically says, I'm here to get you out of here because it's very difficult to, you're in danger. So just as she's about ready to go, or you think she's about ready to go, Okoye walks in and basically, says, look, you had 5 minutes, it was 6, I mean, some of the jokes landed, some of them didn't. Like that one, I thought I got a kick out of. So they ended up taking the student and having her go with them. And then we go to this. She's like, look, I have to pick up a couple things. And we go to this abandoned car garage. And so at which point the feds show up within minutes. The police show up within minutes. So they have to figure out a way to get out. And so basically you see there was a motorcycle, a car, and then something that we didn't see at first.
Not to interrupt you, but
go ahead.
I think you missed one major point here.
Yeah, go for it.
Namor is after this student.
Yes. Yeah. I have to go see it again. I'm going to go see it again tonight. But yeah, no, you're right.
I actually didn't quite know what was going on there because I'm talking about like dark scenes. The scene where Namor is.
Oh yeah, I totally omitted that. Yeah, so talk about that scene, Kyle, please.
Yeah, well, it's just the scene where Namor. Well, actually, there's two parts of the scene. There's Shuri and Ramonda, and they're talking about how like the way they grieve for their dead, and
it was a ritual.
It was
a ritual that basically she said that, look, this is how I do this to help myself grieve.
Yeah.
And so Shuri's like, I'm not going to do this. And she was going to burn the funeral clothing. And she's like, I'm not going to do this. In which case,
so
there was a fire lit.
Was that?
It was T'Challa's.
Okay.
It was the white. Remember in Black Panther when he goes to visit his father the first time?
Yeah.
And it was a white, like, I won't say it's beautiful. I'd love to own that. But it's like a white gown.
Okay.
Gown. That's what it was.
Okay.
So at which point, she's like, I'm not going to do this. So she was very defensive about it. And then out comes Namor. Mm-hmm. And what you were talking about.
He's basically,
and this scene is extremely dark, and I don't know if it was poor lighting or the fire was too far back or whatever, but it didn't work. And we are introduced to Namor for the first time, and he basically says, "Look, I want the scientists. If you tell anybody about this, I will rain down on Wakanda like you have never heard in your life. So now this is where they're trying to figure out, and basically they're trying to figure out, how do we get this taken care of without sacrificing her? And this is the mission, to your point, okay? This is when Okaya and her talk, the queen talk, and say, look, try to get her out. But, yeah, so at that... Yeah.
Student's name is Riri Williams. And you mentioned Ironheart. Ironheart is a TV series that will be released, I believe it's next year. Ryan Coogler is going to produce it, and it looks to be like it might be something special. Just to kind of counter your argument about how, Phase 4 has made it harder for audiences to like connect with the story. I actually disagree, because for me, I feel like you can watch all of these individually and you can still have a great time. It's just that some of the scenes will be more enhanced if you watch the other content. And I think that's kind of been the same since the MCU has started, because the MCU used to do these one-shot shorts that I don't know if you've seen, David, but they are really, really good. They one of them has to do with what transpired between Iron Man 1 and the Incredible Hulk, so that Tony Stark ends up in the bar talking to...
okay, so they're filling in the blanks,
They fill in blanks, and they have this one moment with Coulson, and like those are similar in a way to like a Disney Plus series where you don't have to watch those and you can still enjoy the MCU. Ironheart's a perfect example. I think, like you, I thought she was great in this film. Her name is Dominique Thorne. That's the name of the actress. She brought a new type of like character to the MCU. She I can't quite think right now, but I don't believe we've seen a young black girl in the MCU outside of Shuri. Like,
no.
I think that I don't think I'm missing anybody. The thing with this character is I think she represents the American black woman, a young woman. And I think that's a great way to showcase her against Shuri and Okoye, who are two black Wakandan women. And it is really interesting to see how they utilize her, because she is, in the comics, the Iron Man successor in a way. She kind of just makes her own Iron Man suit, and she has a...
Well, and then that's to the point where I was going to go, is when they're going to escape.
Yeah.
Shuri's on the bike.
Yeah.
Okoye's in the car, and then we see this. So she looks up. She's like, "I've been designing this for years," and she's like, "Does that fly?" And next thing you know, she shoots out of the roof.
I love how that scene. It's like the guy in there is like, she's got an Iron Man suit,
Yeah.
Well,
if you remember Iron Man.
Yeah.
That was the first. I mean, when we talk about movies, it's callbacks, and just being able to call back, like that was the first test. Like how he was just circling around the garage and he just shot up.
But I really like that.
And so that was...
The scene isn't... It didn't feel cheap to me. It didn't feel like it was, in a way, trying to just copy Iron Man. It felt like it was its own thing. And I'm glad that Riri as a character wasn't, kind of, shall we say, limited by or restrained by the Iron Man character. She never even mentions Tony Stark in the movie. And it's not like I was assuming she'd be like, he's my role model. I look up to him, kind of like Kate Bishop in Hawkeye. But this was a little bit different. Like this, they're saving it for the show, of course. But I really like that we live in a world now where an Iron Man suit does, live on and
exist
after Tony Stark's death. But it's not like this is Iron Man, this girl now becoming this next Iron Man because she's a fan of Iron Man. She's just, I think, created this suit because she is a very smart person that also we get to see her and Shuri bond over it. But on the sequence you're talking about with the bike chase sequence, go and expand a little bit more on it because it is really...
Yeah, so basically the police have it surrounded and they all escape, okay? And so one is on the bike, like I said, Shuri. One is in the car, Okoye, and the other is, she has the suit.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, okay, well, here's going to be our rendezvous point. So they're all trying to get to this point. Meanwhile, so there's a lot of action, a lot of car crashes. I mean, a lot of things happen. And so one of them, there was a drone put in the air,
mm-hmm.
and Dee Dee was actually able to, go up and even, I mean, if you want to do another callback, right? I mean, that in the first Iron Man, that was what the demise was of him,
mm-hmm.
Not of Iron Man himself, but the villain.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the icing of the suit. So she was able to actually get the drone. She actually was falling back down to Earth, got everything up and running. And so they actually met on the bridge. And at which point, then we have, and I'm going to butcher their names, so help me out with the sea people.
So you had Atuma, he is the main right-hand man, and then you have Namora, who is the right-hand woman, and
of Namor.
And so
and there were three proxies too. And basically, like Okoye was like, okay, let's go.
Well, they're driving. They're all like, you have Okoye driving her car, you have Riri, who is flying, and then you have Shuri on the motorcycle. And
that's when go ahead.
This moment happens where like Riri, I think they hook her or something, and she gets pulled by a hook, tied down, flies down. Like Okoye's car gets flipped
over,
and Shuri like flies off the motorcycle. And this was a real stunt they tried to do, where Letitia Wright, she even tried to do the stunt herself, and I believe she got,
and from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, but she was pretty badly injured, and they had to stop production.
They stopped production for that, so there was a huge risk in that. And people don't really realize, how hard it is to make a movie and how dangerous it sometimes can be. And I think that we should give some of these actors and stunt men and women, like, they really do deserve a lot of credibility for what they do, because sometimes they don't get a lot of credit for it, because like the stunt work in this film is just incredible. And then you have this crash and Shuri's knocked out, Ironheart's like down, like she can barely move, and the only one there is Okoye. She gets up, and then the it's so funny because you want to call them Atlanteans from the comics, but the Talocans, I'll say, they come, and you have Atuma and Namora, and Atuma is like, Namora, handle the cops, and she like, I don't know if she kills them, but she might have.
She injures them.
She might as well.
She injures them.
And she really, and that is the moment where this scene, I know that many people will have their own scenes and they will say things, but this is, I think, my favorite fight scene since The Winter Soldier, because this is truly, truly the scene where I felt the stakes of this fight. And I had no idea if Okoye was going to make it, because Okoye's fighting this guy, Atuma. He's a beast, and he is beating the crap out of her. And she even fights the lackeys they have, and she's holding her own. She's Okoye, but then this guy just gets the upper hand, and even though he beats her, she still gets up and tries to fight him again. And then Shuri's like, "Take me." He knocks her, Okoye, off of the bridge, and they have these. We didn't even talk about this yet, but they have these. People are making fun of them online. They're calling them water balloons, but they're like the water grenades, which is something I've never seen before. Maybe because they're too much like water balloons. But I love it because like they throw the water grenades at Okoye, and she's like, "Oh, I can knock it out of the way." And when she knocks it out of the way, it just blows in her face, sending her off the bridge. But the tension in that scene is so palpable. And, like, these guys, they want to kill Riri. Like, Shuri intervened. She's like, "Take me with you. We can talk about it." But if Shuri didn't do that, they would have just stabbed Riri.
They would have killed him.
Yeah. And it is really, like, it's a great scene. And then, of course, they take Shuri and Riri underwater.
Now, would you call that? I would call that the end of the first act. Yeah. So at that point, the first act, that it's about. You guys got to understand something. This movie is 2 hours and 41 minutes, minus the credits. Okay, which is probably around 8 minutes, 7-8 minutes. You're looking at about a 2 hour and 45 or 2 hour and 35 minute movie, which is this is one of the longest films in the MCU next to Infinity War. Infinity War, I want to say the TRT was like 242.
Yeah, I believe.
Endgame was 301.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, this is like the third longest movie.
Way longer than the first Black Panther.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The first one just breezed by when I was watching it. But I think it was because of a couple of reasons. Number one, it was on the big screen.
Uh-huh. Number
two, it was so good. And number three, it didn't feel. I think it was like 2 hours. So, yeah, it was that good. So we're out of the first act.